We are here today to have this really important conversation about the culture of TI Labs. And maybe, Carl, if you wouldn't mind just sharing what you hope to accomplish today in this story we're telling.
Something that we've learned about TI Labs is that our business is really unique. And more importantly, our culture is the way that we work, and our culture is, especially for the area that we live in, is really, really unique. And we take it for granted because it's just our culture is built on the foundation of who we are and how we were raised. So we don't see it as anything particularly unique. But what we've learned as we brought new team members on is that it can be quite the culture shock for folks that haven't been in an environment that's as fast-paced as ours, that has such high expectations. And, probably best put, we see ourselves as explorers. And most people that are in an employment situation are intentionally driven not to be explorers. They're line followers. And that is not productive in most of the roles in TI Labs. So what I want to get out of this is hopefully we can communicate and articulate what's unique about the culture, why it's the way it is, how we operate. And then that gives folks an insight before they make a decision to join the team.
Right. Would you agree, Brian? Is that kind of a need to have that story out there?
Yeah, it's important it's really difficult to communicate to new team members before we hire them what that experience is. And, if we can instill any of that feeling before that start date happens, it'll help everyone be on the same playing field and just feels a lot more natural.
Right.
And it's kind of funny, Brian. We've heard some different pieces of feedback from employees. We've heard, wow, this is way better than I could have ever imagined. This is where I want to spend my entire career. And we've heard that sort of sentiment more so than not, luckily. But there's also been some sentiment shared where it's like, wow, this is way harder than I expected. I wish I had known.
Well, from my perspective, TI Labs has one of the most unique cultures I've ever been a part of. And there's such an authenticity about it, which is what I think is so different, so valuable, so unique. And I think that authenticity comes from you guys. And part of, I think, the gap might be that people don't really get to know you very well, depending on the role they have in the company. They may get to spend time with you in the hiring process or in the onboarding, but it's really getting to know you guys. That's how you really understand the culture. And so my hope is that we can talk a little bit more about you guys and your backgrounds and how you think about things to help people, understand that and hear that from you, sooner rather than later in the process of working on your team.
So, of course, we're a family business. Brian and I started it. Brian is the youngest and I am the oldest. So that was a great start to the business. But it was really started at the time that our father passed away. And we recognized we were spread out across the country, and we recognized how important family was. And so we decided, let's try and make a business work. And at that point in time, we didn't know what we wanted to accomplish, but in the days talking to our father as he was in those last days, I remember asking him a question. Dad, you worked so hard throughout your career and your life. Would you do it that way again? And he said, absolutely. I don't know any other way to do it. And that to me was it was just a resounding message. And that's exactly how he was. He was an extremely hard worker. We had the great fortune of growing up in an entrepreneurial family. He had a business that he basically grew from nothing to a pretty major commercial contracting business for underground construction. And we got to experience that. Most of the time for us, that meant that Dad was at the office late, working at the office, on plans or whatever. And so we didn't get to see a whole lot of him during the week because he was so dedicated to his business. And on the weekends, he tended to be probably more for the older brother than the younger, but tended to be he was a workhorse with us. So there was always outdoor activities. There was always shovels used or rakes. There were always things that he had us doing that were physical labor to help with the homestead. Whether it was during the week or the weekend, that man never stopped. And at the time growing up, it was really, really tough and daunting because every time you turn around, it's more work. But there's no doubt that type of environment instilled in us a degree of work ethic that is unyielding. It's who we are. And at some point in our life, if someone asks us that question, we're stuck saying the same thing. I don't know any other way other than working this hard. So I think that's a core part of what drives us. And the other aspect that Dad was very diverse in the things that he tried or he was interested in or he tackled. So he had working everything from metalworking to sculpture. He was very much always exploring and trying to solve problems in unique ways. And he brought us into a lot of those opportunities. So it's just something, those are seeds that have been planted in us from day one. So I think that's, from my standpoint, at least part of the foundation for our background. You probably have maybe a different path to share, Brian.
The big piece that is highlighted for me is that our dad would always be out there doing something new. And it wasn't a matter of knowing how or not how to do it. What's the right way? What's the wrong way? He just did it. And being the youngest, I got to watch my oldest brothers make a lot of mistakes and go through that process, and watched our father go through and just learn things left and right. And, I think that put each of us in a great position to have a different perspective and view of the world around us. That's really been instilled into the culture. We were allowed to make as many mistakes as we wanted to endure.
You generally didn't make the same mistake twice.
That's great. So how did that background serve you when you started your careers?
Well, being the oldest, I also had the great fortune of working for Dad's business. I think I started at the age of 12 or 13. I think we had to forge my age on the work permit because I was under the legal limit to work. But I wanted to work. He, of course, wanted me to work, so I started working in the business. And that was the start of my career at the age of 12 or 13. Every summer, I would work with a different crew, and the idea was that I would start picking rocks and sweeping streets on those crews, landscaping crews. And then I would work through all the different crews within the business. I started picking rocks, and I ended up running equipment and managing crews. And his whole point in that was, you need to know how to do everything in the business. And if you don't, there's no way that you can lead the business. So you're going to learn from the ground up. And of course, being the boss's son, nobody made that easy on me. So I was ridiculed and teased. And I think many of the crews found the absolute hardest way for me to do things. So at the time, that was probably a little frustrating if I even recognized it. But looking at it in hindsight, it really taught me a great deal of grit, figuring things out. So I worked through summers until I graduated from college, and then I ended up getting a job as an engineer for a manufacturing company. And I needed a job, so I came in, and it was an hourly job, and there was a ton to do. So it was unbelievable the amount of work that they put on my plate. And so I asked him, hey, is there overtime possible? And they said, no, we don't have the budget for that. But we set a project schedule, and I worked on that project, and hours didn't matter to me. And I probably worked 50-hour weeks pretty easily, maybe more. And the way that I approached that was it was a great opportunity for me to learn something that I didn't know before and prove myself to get the job. I ended up getting a job. And then, maybe every 6 to 9 months, my role there changed, either through promotion or lateral movement. And I was always given new opportunities. And that was just amazing to me because there was new challenges that I could explore and overcome. So I worked there for 6 or 7 years and then had the opportunity to move to Minnesota and build an engineering department for another manufacturing company. They didn't have an engineering department, they needed one. So they hired me as a senior, as the director to build the department. That was a really great opportunity. I stepped into shoes that were bigger than my feet and learned the school of hard knocks from a leadership standpoint and building a department from scratch, which I really didn't have a great deal of experience in, and also operating at a professional level that was exceeded what I had had the opportunity to do previously. So I worked there for, 8 years, stayed in the same position, but was able to explore a lot of different things. I had a ton of autonomy. So I work in the evenings, on the weekends. But the way that I see it is all the work that I've done has not been work. It's really been exploration and problem solving. And I've had, maybe at least 1.5 times my career length solving problems because of the amount of time I've invested. And that's something that may not have ever been reflected in my compensation, but it didn't matter because I took that with me. That didn't stay at the job. And I think that's become my perspective. The more that I am engaged in a work or a job, the more that I get to explore and learn something, which gives me more value to contribute to that thing or something else. And it really isn't a job. It's just, it really is just an exploration and self-improvement.
So when you got these new opportunities, did you go into them knowing and understanding the role that you were being asked to fill? Or was it a matter of saying yes and figuring it out later?
I don't think the people that were asking me to fill those roles knew what I needed to do. So it was blue sky in a lot of those cases. All of the roles that I've had have been unscripted. And if there were scripts, I tended to go off script. And my purview from an activity standpoint has always been wider than the expectations. And that's probably why my roles have changed so much over the years, because I would see needs or opportunities and I would just jump on them and didn't need to be asked.
Yeah, it's such a good perspective to understand how you see the opportunities your team members have in the DI Labs environment. How about you, Brian?
I think Carl's and my career have a lot in common, but they're also very different. They share a commonality of exploration, where Carl explored for long durations at businesses and explored wide swaths of areas of those businesses. I spent my time bouncing around, experiencing different businesses and how they operated internally. And I don't see my career path as glamorous before DI Labs as Carl's was. The path was very different, but my time has really been spent around practical businesses. And as I joined businesses, a few come in mind where in Colorado, supporting a team rebuilding aircraft engines and learning for the first time the machining practices and the FAA requirements and all of the steps that go into it. A great exploration where failure wasn't an option, because in that case, a failure meant that someone could crash their plane and die. So all those requirements very, very high. But at that time and all my time has been on really mechanical components and working on process optimization. How can this job be done better? How can I support the business in a way that requires me to work less, but also adds value? And I think from my view, there's a tendency for time to be confused with quality or what you're working on. And I often found that when starting a new position or starting a new job, that time was very high. For me to get on board, for me to understand what the processes were, I spent a lot of time and got very little done. But I was very intentional about creating processes and reducing my time involved in the outcome or what I was delivering for that company. And I think what that netted for me is it netted a great experience to explore the tools that were available, discovering new tools that I could use to improve those processes, and generally leave with a better perspective.
Well, so one question I would have is, was that ever intimidating? It sounds like you ended up in an industry that highly technical, very advanced. Was that intimidating to enter into that and be charged with that kind of responsibility?
It for me, it wasn't, because from our path, mistakes are a part of what we do. And failure is an obvious part of it. And feeling the wrath of failure growing up and experiencing that in business way easier. As long as your intentions are right and you're working on the right path, failures are really easy to overcome. So I enjoyed the opportunity to experience those failures and then improve upon them.
It's interesting that you said that it's not glamorous, or my career was glamorous in the tenure. I may have had longer tenure in the role, but what's really interesting for me looking back on what I knew of your career is the confidence that you've had and humility, confidence in situations where if something wasn't being handled properly or with the right level of moral, for lack of a better term, moral or honest approach, you were very clear and quick to step away from it. And it was that simple. And it's always been remarkable to me. I think a lot of the moving that you did was because your standards were so much higher, or your expectations were so much higher than the businesses that you worked for. And specifically thinking about the first big role that you had right from school was for the grippage business. And I remember hearing your stories about being responsible for the maintenance and inventory of all the grippage equipment, but you ended up re-engineering their inventory and repair portion of their business. And I remember it got to the point where the owners, for several periods, if not even between those, gave you the keys to the business, basically said, look, we need you to manage this. And I recall them asking you to be the general manager. And I think you stepped away from that. You chose not to do that because of the way that they treated people and you, and it just wasn't a good fit. So it's been really neat for me to see your confidence in how important an honest relationship is and how important treating other people is.
Yeah, that the business practices and the way that businesses treat their team members is something it's been instilled in us, and it's very important.
Brian, we know that you have a brilliant mind, and your ability to solve problems is just kind of awe-inspiring. So how did the diversity of the work you were able to do before DI Labs feed that ability to solve problems sort of in any scenario?
In the variety of career or the variety of work that I did before DI, I was able to test and play in all sorts of different arenas, starting with electrical in the lighting and grip company, repairing very high voltage, complex circuit boards and lighting radio equipment. In each area, especially in electrical, learning this for the first time, not have had any experience before this, I would get electrocuted. I'd let the smoke out of machines. I learned the hard way, very little Google searching at that point in time, but there was some. And I explored as best I could to support that business. And as I went to the next and did the aircraft engine repairing and supporting that team, learning about mechanical components and what is required to have a system that's safe enough for you to fly across the country. That was a great experience into what reliable looks like and what are mechanical components and how should they be designed. And then beyond that, having the experience to be able to diagnose and repair electromechanical systems, vehicles, from gasoline to diesel-based, and being successful at that, I think being able to dive in, make mistakes, learn from them, and improve upon them, it's just been a part of my past and present.
How would you describe how Brian's brain works, Carl?
Probably the most inspiring thing that I've ever witnessed. And I've always felt that I've always looked up to Brian, which is weird because he's my younger brother. So I don't know how you look up to a younger brother, but you can. And I have always looked up to Brian because from as long as I can remember, he's had that aptitude and the ability to quickly identify a problem and be able to apply reason to it and solve it. And I've only seen that expand since having that great opportunity to work with him. So he helps me raise my bar in that regard because it's incredible. And it's the most amazing thing I've ever experienced in a professional, in a professional environment.
I've heard you describe sometimes there's moments when all of a sudden everything snaps into place and Brian figures it out. There's the aha, oh my gosh. What's that? What are those moments like?
Magic. They're like magic. And that's the best way that I could describe it. And there is always those magical moments. And that's a large part of our business's tagline of there's always a solution. The underpinnings of that is really Brian and his ability to solve any problem. And it really is. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, when we can get to a solution that's very unusual and we get to show our clients or even our team members internally what we've created, I think that's when the magic happens.
So, Brian, how would you describe Carl's brain in terms of his ability to see around corners and have a vision for where you're headed?
I've looked in Carl's office and I've been in his house, but I've never seen, the magic ball where you run your hands over. I've never seen one of those, but I'm confident he has one somewhere because he's predicting things in the future that always happen. And it can be next steps in projects that are so far ahead that you can't even believe that it's going to happen. It can be industry-related changes that we're focused on solving. The thing that I've appreciated about Carl is he sets his sights on these impossible to see goals. And I've learned to trust Carl to the deepest degree, and we go down the path of living that in real time. And of course, what happens is Carl's prediction always comes to life. And I don't know if it's because we're willing it to life or if it would happen either way. But the reality is that we get there, and whatever magic ball he has, I wish he'd share it.
So how would you want your team to understand the way Sean's brain works? Because he's the third Douglas and he has a unique contribution as well.
Sean is the most loyal and the most caring and stubborn person I know. And stubborn is usually used in a negative connotation. In this regard, it's used in the absolute best connotation. And Sean is 108. He's more committed to whatever the mission is. He's more committed to that than any other single person. And that is amazing. And he's got his nickname's the Ox, and it's because of his brute strength, not just physical, but I guess mental as well, and his grit. It's just I've grown to know Sean in a way that I never could have before, and he is also an inspiration. Oftentimes, especially as of late, he's the last person to leave. We see him sometimes leaving the office at 10 o'clock at night, and he's the first person to get there, sometimes as early as 5:30. And he's doing that because that's what's necessary at this stage of the game in order to get things done. And he's the most committed, hardworking person I know outside of Brian.
Sean is relentless in his effort to get to the solution, to get to the result, to get to the end. It's probably not even end isn't the right term. He's relentless in his continuation and his effort in everything he does. It's unbelievable.
Would you say he models your values?
He does.
He definitely does.
It seems like your method of transferring values to your team is to model them. You two aren't prone to talk about your culture. You just live your culture, and hopefully people observe and understand why you do what you do. But thinking about your background and some of your experiences in your early careers, how has that formed the values of DI Labs?
I'd say my values aren't career formed. They're family formed. And that's how they became to be. And it just so happens that they're applied in a professional setting, but they're very much personal values that I just carry. I'm confident Brian does too. We just carry with us wherever we go. And I think the things I've learned throughout my career are probably maybe what not to do and also ways to handle things. But I don't know that it's fundamentally shaped my values because they were so hard-coded, from the get-go.
Yeah, I would say that in a way, maybe our career polished and allowed us to understand the value of the way we do things. And we've instilled that through our daily activities, our actions, and how we tackle problems at DI. And it's so instilled in what we do that it's not a switch that we turn on and off. It's just who we are.
Right. There's such an authenticity to it. Over time, it was just a matter of figuring out how to articulate these things that you were doing, living, showcasing in a way that other people could connect with so they could do the same. Do you think your values, however you state them, are understood by your team? Is it a challenge for them to understand those values?
I would guess that for the majority of our team members, the learning curve of our values is probably 6 to 9 months. And we do have team members that grasp them very quickly. And the ones who do are the ones who are really foundational to our team, and they have the biggest impact. And those who don't, they either learn it in that period or they don't. And when they don't, it's not a good fit.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't feel authentic to them the way it needs to, and it does with you, then maybe they won't flourish in that environment.
If it's not natural for them, it's just not natural for the team.
How has this whole discussion and the story around where your values come from shaped what your expectations are when you bring on a team member? And you guys are very humble as well, so I think it's difficult to be both humble and then want to also share very high expectations of performance and things like that.
I can't tell you how many times I was charged with a project growing up, and I did that project and I got done, and it was horseshit, according to Dad, and it needed to be redone. And that was a mistake that was part of the learning process. It became clear that the way that I was initially approaching things, I didn't set a high enough bar. And Dad had exacting standards, and he worked to a degree of perfection, and that's not natural. And I remember having that instilled in me, and I've held that through my career, and have held others accountable or responsible to the same level of expectations. Because doing it okay, just because it may take less energy, is just simply not acceptable. The rest of the world can do it okay, but we're going to flourish because we do it outstanding.
And part of our expectations there as explorers is that team members will be able to come in, they'll support us, And they'll also look upstream when they're working on their projects, and they'll look to the right and they'll look to the left, and they'll be able to prepare and predict challenges that may arise for the area that they're responsible for. And that's really challenging. I would guess a great deal of teams today aren't exposed to that level of exploring and preparing and looking and changing direction to get to the end result. And that's a tough expectation to have for a team. And it's a big challenge for all of our team members. So I think as we think back to the exploring that we've done, it's like you got to have your head up. You got to be looking around. It isn't just checking a box. It's about delivering in an ever-changing environment.
Yeah, and as we deliver those things, and as you explain that, Brian, I think the other component is we ourselves probably do, but try to never deliver something to someone else that we wouldn't accept ourselves. And we expect that same thing from the team.
And does that apply to every single person in the company, no matter what they do? Or are you talking the more technical roles?
I think all of our roles that we have today, all of our teammates that are on our team today, we have the best team that we've ever had. And all of our roles for the areas that our team members are responsible for, that is what they do. And everyone's learning, everyone's getting better at their responsible areas, but they take that on and they look forward, they look back, and they make sure that we deliver what we promised we would.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that from my standpoint, we've experienced team members that don't have the drive to meet the expectations, and then we have experienced team members that do. And those team members like we have today that do, it becomes our job to help refine what the expectations look like. My expectation is when we bring on folks that are working in administrative or otherwise professional roles, that they come in as adults and they carry themselves and behave as professionals. So there isn't any babysitting. If you've got questions you've got to ask, you know that you're here to contribute to the team. If you're sitting idle, don't. But I'm not going to come and follow up on you. And we're going to give you challenges, and you've got to be working on them, and we're not going to give you the mat, because if we were to do that, then we would be doing it ourselves. And we need you to help us extend our exploration and help us find the best solution. Now, Brian, you're going to have a way to put that is a bit more refined.
Where we're at with our business today is we're really making a foundation, and we're bringing on team members that can help us build that foundation. And during that process, there are some directions, there are some instructions, but for the most part, we are building that from scratch. And there's always a new request or some new problem that we have to solve that we've never seen before. And we're all responsible for playing a part in solving those problems. So silver platter, there definitely aren't silver platters at DI Labs. A silver platter would entail that there's a role you play. You've got a narrow set of responsibilities. You come in and you follow a process that's predefined, and you do those things accurately. And that's not what we have at DI.
Yeah, and that's really it's been a core part of our growth strategy. We're on the cutting edge in our industry. So a lot of the things that we're doing, we are the very first ones to do it. We're the very first ones to develop the process, to use the equipment, to sell the solution. So whether or not that changes, I don't know, because that is part of our core DNA, is that exploration, as we are on the front. So I think that really is a core part of at least the technical, I call it technical and business services side of our business. The manufacturing, of course, we need to have standard processes, but on the front end, we've got to have explorers, and there may be room for those that aren't explorers, but quite honestly, they're probably better suited in a standard role in a normal business, which for me, I could never survive. And that's the beauty of having different different personalities and different types of opportunities is that everybody has a fit somewhere.
So does there need to be a high tolerance or, I don't know, passion for change in your organization? Is that part of the expectation?
One of the things that we hear, a team member will take a week off and they'll come back and they'll say, wow, everything's changed. You've reworked the front office. There's a new piece of equipment on the floor. And tolerance for change is a must-have. It'll either be learned or it's something that's brought to the table when team members start. But if anxiety occurs when you think of change, DI Labs is a scary place.
Yeah, and we jokingly say something to the effect that there's 4 DI Labs years for every human year. So that's how fast things change.
Yeah, I'm wondering what goes into the decisions that you're making about what's next for DI Labs. How are those decisions made?
From the very beginning, or shortly thereafter, we've had a vision for what we want to accomplish, and from a very big picture standpoint. So everything we've done with the business up till now has been to get us to that place of where our vision is. And the specific aspects of that change may look different than what we expected, but directionally it's going in the same direction. So we're driven by that vision, and that our change is driven by that. Then we're also driven by the market. So you made the comment about seeing around corners, and we're very intentional about understanding what technologies are coming, what customer expectations might be, how the markets are going to shift, so that we can get ahead of that curve. And if we're not driving the change, then we're right on its heels. And so that anticipatory position is what's driving a lot of our change. We will jump quickly if we feel like there's a great opportunity for us to be in a leading position, then we'll jump quickly. And that can mean expansion. It can mean changing the type of business adding new business segments to our business that's different than what we do today. It may look like just random change. I don't know what it looks like on the outside, but it's very intentional on the inside. It's driven by customers and our vision.
Yeah, I could see the changes that we've been making is from the outside being rapid, and how the heck does that happen? But as we are preparing for new equipment, approaching a new market, or solving a problem, we spend a great deal of time predicting how we can approach that in the most logical way. And of course, talking about what are our pain points today. So looking at the current status and then looking at where it could go, we're always predicting for how can we solve that problem? How can we be prepared for that next piece? A great example of that is the facility that we moved into. Carl and I had looked at facilities at least a year and a half, if not further, before we made the move. And we were waiting for the right time and the right moment to take action. On the outside, we're not communicating with everybody that we're actively looking for a building, but we're investing resources internally to make that a reality. And then when that point in time comes, we make that decision, we make the move. And so far, those changes and decisions that we've made have resulted in the right steps.
And it's funny because every time we do something like that, we purchased the first HP printer or moved into the new building, we found that immediately after that it opened doors that would have never been available to us. So that careful planning really does, and the prediction and the careful planning really do come together to create this, in hindsight, masterful plan that seems maybe somewhat erratic or spontaneous to outsiders or even insiders in our business that aren't a part of some of those planning discussions.
So what's at stake for you with this business, and what is it important for your team members to understand about that? How all in are you on this?
There's no doubt about that we're all in. DI Labs is like our skin. So we are living in DI Labs. And it's while it's a business, it's I think for me, a very personal and dear part of my life. because of what instigated its beginnings. And so, of course, we're all in. We've got everything. We're fully vested. We've got everything we have available supporting the business, and it is truly our life. And I think not because of how far we are in, but more importantly, because of how personal it is. That's what drives the expectations, that this is very, very personal. And so there's a lot of things we don't share with outsiders about the business, and sometimes even insiders, because it almost feels vulnerable because of that. It's just such a personal thing for us. So we've had lots of questions like, what do you do? What are you building DI Labs for? Are you going to sell it someday? And the response is, hell no. What the hell would we do if we sold it? I mean, this really is something that, like from my standpoint, I don't see an end in. It's perpetual. And it gives us the opportunity to continue to explore and do it while providing commercial value to customers. And something that they need, we can provide. And so we're absolutely all in.
I think a great way to see some of that is the activities that happen that aren't required of us. So I can think of we were preparing for an event, and we needed to have the parking lot cleared. And being there on a lot of weekends, not all weekends, but a lot of weekends, Carl brought in a vehicle to plow the parking lot. And there's been times where there are messes and disasters that occur, and we're there mopping the floors, sweeping the floors. We're caring for each and every area of the business the best we can. And we're making sure that we're also being responsible to the business while we're doing that. But we're so invested in the business. It's really, the business is our family. I mean, this is how we were raised. Growing up, when it was family time, we'd be working on a project. We'd be mowing the lawn. We'd be picking up leaves, cutting wood. Family time was work time. So as we're at the business, it's like, this is who we are. It's foundational for us. And we started this business bootstrapped. We've built it from virtually nothing. And we built it with our hands. And I just don't see us being able to take a step away from it, from selling the business to an outside firm, bringing on investors who's going to change our culture, or prevent us from taking these creative and exploratory actions that we've done. And that's just who we are.
I think one question I had that maybe it would be worth going into a little bit is, the change that happens a lot, the high expectations. How do all of those things create opportunities for your employees?
I think something that I've appreciated about watching our team members grow is the fact that if we have a team member join us and they are the right culture fit and they're there to make changes just as we are, we do everything in our capability to make sure that we align them with a position that they're best suited for at DI. And that can mean a lot of different things. That can mean a position that's more focused. That can mean a position that's less focused. But working with those team members to make sure that we can coach them through either the learning process or the career path and find out what they really want to accomplish. And we're as intentional as we can be about guiding that.
I couldn't agree more.
Is there anything else you feel like is a story or piece of info that you think it'd be important for someone considering joining your team to know about DI Labs?
So I believe that businesses can be a force for good in our personal lives. It gives us a place to go, do meaningful work with great other team members. It allows us to experience new things and change our perspectives. And so beyond the stuff of 3D printing, our business is really about that if we can have the type of impact with one individual that Dad was able to have with however many he impacted that way, it's like, man, we've done something simply amazing. And it doesn't have to be that big of an impact. We just have to be able to positively contribute to people's lives. And that stands for our customers, our employees, our families, those that we work with, outside vendors. And that's what our business is about, is making that type of change. And it just so happens that we're using our skills and experience to be able to make that's like our leverage, is our skills and our experience. But the outcome is really improving someone else's life.
With the ongoing changes and optimizations that we have at DI, there's a lot that we're preparing for. And there's a great deal of collaboration that we do internally to make sure that as we're taking on projects, we're starting new projects, that we do that collaboratively so that we can prepare not just for the completion of this, but also for the bigger overarching goal that we have. And there can be a desire to have to put more color or more individual flair and be the hero. And I think taking that one man, one person, one individual approach, I'm going to solve this problem and I'm going to be the hero. I think what we've found is that doesn't work for any of us at DI. We all have to collaborate on projects, because whatever it is we have our hands on, it's going to impact our other team members. So having a team-focused approach where we have leaders, but those leaders are really relying on their teammates. And without that, it's challenging to be successful at DI.
I think we're both introverts, so our natural tendency is to be introverted. But at the same time, we also live in and amongst other people.
We tend to be very lean in our communications, in the fact that when we're working on a project, when we're connecting, we tend to dive right into the details. And there's not a whole lot of fluff in the communication that we have internally when we're working on projects.
Someone said to me once, being at DI Labs is like going through the Navy SEAL program. And I kind of, just chuckled at that. But there's a lot of truth in it, because we are so intentional about how we manage time, and we're very lean, but our company lives in the shadow created by our company, which means we act and live much larger than we are, which is probably mind-blowing to our competitors and to even our suppliers. That means that the expectations for each of us are remarkably high. And it's like going through a Navy SEAL program. And I'm convinced for myself and anybody who joins, as long as they have the willingness and interest, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
How do you help people see the disconnect between what their expectations are of themselves and what yours are?
There's an obviousness to us that we need to do a tremendous amount of coaching. But at the point that we're at in our business and the type of team members that we need, the expectations for awareness are quite high for me.
So there's a side that's frustrating and challenging, and it brings anger, which is a team member makes commitment and they don't follow through, and they don't communicate that they don't follow through, and they let it go. That's the worst thing that can happen. But on the flip side, the best thing that can happen is a teammate suggests that they may be able to support on something. And then they carry that out, and they carry it out with such excellence. And they're so thoughtful in how they provide that solution. That's mind-blowing. That's the thing that we love. That's the best thing.
Another thing that is highly frowned upon and ultimately drives a great deal of frustration is repeated mistakes that are the same. And Brian said it very well earlier on, that we encourage mistakes. They're an absolute necessary part of the learning process. We make them all the time, and they're encouraged. But when you make the same mistake repeated times and it's been reviewed, and that is like unacceptable. Those are dumb mistakes, and we're striving to make smart ones, and that's you make them once. You learn from that, and you may make a similar one again, but you'll never make that same mistake twice. And our team members cannot make the same mistake twice. They've got to be smart mistakes. And I think that's when the magic happens, is we bring team members on that are super aware, that understand priorities and when to elevate and when not to elevate or escalate matters. And that happens. We have a great team today, and a lot of that team has either come with, team members has either come with that ability or is building that ability, and that's when magic happens. And that's when we all get to go home every day and say, wow, it was hard today, but it was great because we all pulled together. We've got such a great team. And we hear that more often than not. And so we want team members who want to be a part of a great team and contribute to its greatness.
Is there a chance that your company might look completely different in 5 years? Is it about additive manufacturing, or is it about this innovative culture and this opportunity you're creating?
It's about providing solutions and having an impact on our clients and having a direct impact, not only to other businesses, but to people. And, whether we use a tool like additive or we use a completely different tool, it's about having the impact. So in 5-10 years, I'm confident we'll still be in the additive space, but I'm also confident that we'll have a lot of other tools at our disposal to make that solution a reality.
I couldn't have said it better myself.